I guess I'll refer to it as sidetracked today. We're not going right into the lesson because I think it was last week. Well, we were studying Micaiah and the prophets. And I think it was Barbara who made this statement, that how do you know whether a prophecy is true? And we've all been taught that, well, if it happens, then it was a true prophecy. And so I went back because something kept niggling back there. And in all the empty space, there was something going, I know there's something more. And so I went back, and there is. And so that we're going to start talking about that. How do we know if a prophecy is true? And I went back to the Bible because the Bible tells us. Now, I went to the King James Version, and I used a Bible by a gentleman known as Charles Ryrie, Ryrie. He is considered the greatest or the best King James scholar of all time. He was, I think, a Scotsman. He held a doctorate of theology and a doctorate of psychology. And those of us who went to the Bible Museum, this was years ago when we went down to Dallas, and we went to the Bible Museum. And if you can picture when we walked in, to the right was the desk, and down the center aisle was several tables, long tables full of information. That was all Dr. Ryrie's information. And at the time, the Dallas Bible Institute, or whatever it's called, had thought it wasn't just his own, it was going to be his, belonged to the Institute after he died. Unfortunately, his family took it, so we don't have access to it anymore. But we did at one time have a lot of his information and his research. And so I went to one of his study Bible, and he talks to the reader before he opens. And he made this statement that I think is priceless. It is, the Bible is the greatest of all books. To study it is the noblest of all pursuits. To understand it, the highest of all goals. Mm-hmm. And that was his philosophy on Bible study.
That's awesome.
Then I went to another, and it happens to be another King James study Bible that I have, and went to the book of Deuteronomy. Now, we studied that years ago, but Deuteronomy is a priceless book in that, well, it is considered, the word Deuteronomy in Greek means second law. Second law, the word Deuteronomy in Greek. And it's considered to be the best book of Jewish law, the second law. Okay? What was the first? The 10 Commandments in Mount Sinai. Then came, and so Deuteronomy is considered the second law. Go to Deuteronomy and go to chapter 13. Deuteronomy chapter 13. By the way, while you're doing that, Moses wrote the book of Deuteronomy. He wrote it. It came at the end of the Jewish people's 40 years of wandering through the desert. They are all gathered at the Jordan River, ready to cross over into the promised land. And they stop, they're all camped there, and Moses delivers the book of Deuteronomy. It consists of 3 sermons, 3 different sermons that he gives to the people. And by the way, he tells them in there, and I didn't look it up, I forgot, I'm sorry. He tells them, you're going to be kicked out of this land. Those were his exact words, I'm paraphrasing. But before they've even gone into the promised land, he's telling them, you're going to be sent back out. So that was part of one of his sermons. But in chapter 13, he gives, he's talking, it's one of his sermons, and he's talking about false prophets or prophets. And would someone volunteer to please read verses 1 through 5?
I will.
Thank you, Deborah.
If a prophet or one who foretells by dreams appears among you and announces to you a miraculous sign or wonder, and if the sign or wonder of which he has spoken takes place, and he says, let us follow other gods, gods you have not known, and let us worship them, you must not listen to the words of that prophet or dreamer. The Lord your God is testing you to find out whether you love him with all your heart and with all your soul. It is the Lord your God you must follow, and him you must revere. Keep his commands and obey him. Serve him and hold fast to him. That prophet or dreamer must be put to death because he preached rebellion against the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt and redeemed you from the land of slavery. He has tried to turn you from the way the Lord your God commanded you to follow. You must purge the evil from among you.
Thank you. So Moses tells them about how to know false prophets right here. This is a perfect example of the Bible will give you the answers if you search through the Bible. And what he's saying here, well, rather than give it in my words, I'm going to tell you exactly what the Reverend Dr. Ryrie said. Note, a false prophet's prediction might very well come to pass. So God lets false prophets make their prophecy and lets them happen. The determination, I'm again quoting Dr. Ryrie, the determination of whether he was a true or false prophet is not made on the basis of whether it happened, but on whether or not he led the people away from God.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
That's
So
awesome.
we should judge a true prophet. Did he lead the people to God or towards God? And I don't know about you, but I find that much easier to handle.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you, Marlene.
It goes on to say, Dr. Ryrie goes on to say, the success of false prophets was permitted in order to test God's people. Now that's Dr. Ryrie's comment. But so false prophets can prophesy something that doesn't happen. But what we need to ask is, Was it pointing towards God? Jane?
You know, it makes me think about when some people say, well, I don't need to really read the Old Testament. I'm just going to read the New Testament, right? Well, it just shows how important the two are intertwined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the saying? The new is in the old concealed. The old is in the new revealed.
So
And
true.
that's the description of the Bible. Barbara?
Your reference to Deuteronomy. This is kind of interesting. I remember I didn't mention it at the time because we didn't. If we flip back to everything, we'd never get through anything. But anyway, when Elijah performed the miracle of the water, when they had the drought, and he got with the prophets of Jezebel, and he was the true main prophet. And when he finished proving he was right, he told the people of Israel, or the king of Ahab and Jezebel, you need to kill all those other prophets, the false prophets. And I must say, at the time, I thought, wow, that's kind of strong, but I guess that's what God wanted. But the reference it gave was Deuteronomy, that statement that you made about killing off all the false prophets. And that's where that's precise. So look at the tie from Deuteronomy all the way up to Elijah, that Elijah did what it said in Deuteronomy, and there's 2,000 years in between. So it's very relevant.
Yeah.
Very relevant.
Yeah. So, and I know, and I said at the time, I love the book of Deuteronomy. I've often said, if you can't read anything in the any of the Old Testament except one book, read the book of Deuteronomy. I just think it's a fantastic book. It says a lot of things we don't like hearing, but if you have a chance, do go back and read it, because the Bible tells us very clearly, clear back then, exactly how to judge whether or not a prophet is a true prophet. Moses told us back then. Okay. Now to Kings. Back to Kings, chapter 22. Okay. And last week we started with Micaiah and the prophets warning against the war in Syria. And they called in Micaiah, who, by the way, I'm going to call him, was a good prophet. And remember, Ahab hated him because he said, he prophesies against me. He said, he doesn't tell me the things I want to hear, is what he's basically saying. So Micaiah was a good prophet. He tried to warn Ahab about what was coming, and Ahab didn't want to hear it. He wanted to hear what his 400 other prophets that he had bribed, on my word, were saying, because they were saying what he wanted to hear. That, gee, you're a good guy and everything you're doing is exactly right. Micaiah refused to go along with that. Another good example, and I've said this before, and you'll hear me say it again as we're going through Kings. God did not walk away and turn against the northern kingdom or Israel, whatever name you want to give. He kept trying. God was still there. He was still in that northern kingdom. And there were people who were with him in the northern kingdom. But the majority of the people did not listen to him and did not want him. That didn't mean that God didn't keep trying. He did. He did. And to me, that's the most important thing. Remember, God did not walk away from that northern kingdom, from the northern part of Israel. He stayed with them. They walked away from him. And that's still true today. God does not walk away from you. You walk away from him. Okay? We got down to 1 Kings chapter 22, verses 24 through 20. I think it's 28. These are where now they've gone through the prophesying. Micaiah's trying to warn Ahab. Ahab isn't really listening, doesn't like what he's saying. So now Micaiah's going to get thrown into prison. So we are going to read verses 24 through 28. And then I'll turn it over to Barbara for the Chronicles. Laura, would you read those verses about Micaiah being in prison, please?
Sure. Then Zedekiah, son of Kenaniah, went up and slapped Micaiah in the face. Which way did the Spirit from the Lord go when he went from me to speak to you? He asked. Micaiah replied, You will find out on the day you go hide in an inner room. The king of Israel then ordered, Take Micaiah and send him back to Ammon, the ruler of the city, and to Joash, the king's son. And say, This is what the king says. Put this fellow in prison and give him nothing but bread and water until I return safely. Micaiah declared, If you ever return safely, the Lord has not spoken through me. Then he added, Mark my words, all you people.
Okay. To Ahab, this was the best way to get rid of somebody he didn't like, who was saying what he didn't want to hear. Was throw him in prison. Okay. Now Barbara is going to do the Chronicles. It's 2 Chronicles chapter 18, verses 23 through 27 are the specific verses that she's going to be covering. And Barbara, I'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, now listen, because it's almost word for word what's in Chronicles. I'm glad it's so close. Yes.
Would you repeat
Jane?
where we're at in 2 Chronicles? I didn't catch.
Okay, 2 Chronicles chapter 18, verses 23 through 28.
Thank you.
Okay, this is almost where I'm glad it came so close so you can hear what it's saying. It's like somebody got tired when they were writing Chronicles and said, I'm going to flip back to Kings and put down what they said. Okay, it's the reaction of the false prophets and Ahab. Then Zedekiah, the son of Chenaniah, went near and struck Micaiah on the cheek and said, Which way did the Spirit from the Lord go, from whom to speak to you? And Micaiah said, Indeed, shall you see on that day when you go into an inner chamber to hide. Then the king of Israel, now who's the king of Israel? Ahab, right. It's interesting, they don't always use the name. They'll use Israel or Judah, so make sure you keep that fresh in your mind, which one they're talking about, okay? So the king of Israel said, Take Micaiah and return him to Ammon, the governor of the city, and to Joash, the king's son, and say, Thus says the king, Put this fellow in prison and feed him with bread of affliction and water of affliction until I return in peace. But Micaiah said, If you ever return in peace, the Lord has not spoken to me. Now, that would be something Ahab would not like to have heard, would he? Okay. And he said, Take heed, all you people. Okay, so Zedekiah responded the way some do when they're defeated in an argument, and that is they respond with violence. And how many fights start as a verbal, and when the one's losing doesn't like it, so he slugs the guy who made that statement. Okay, and that's kind of what they did here. King Ahab responded the way many tyrants do, when they are confronted with the truth. Ahab wanted Micaiah imprisoned and deprived. He says, feed him with bread of affliction and water of affliction. The phrase bread of affliction and water of affliction is translated as bread and water of scant measure. When I first read it, I thought differently. I thought it meant there was something ugly in the taste, or it wasn't going to do them any good. But it means to give them very little. Just give him enough bread and water to sustain his life, but no more. So that word takes a little different turn in translation. It doesn't mean harm, it means deprived. Okay. The prophet Micaiah made one final and ultimate appeal. He was willing to be judged by whether his prophecy came to pass or not, since he knew his words were true. It was fitting for him to cry out as they dragged him back to prison, quote, "Take heed, all you people." So I can just see Micaiah, going through this with Ahab, the guy Zedekiah slapping him across the face. Ahab saying, "Get him to prison. Don't give him any more food or drink than he needs to sustain his life," etc. Okay, so he goes through all that, but he knows his prophecy is true, even if the others do not believe. He knows that it's true. It's going to come to pass. So he turns to the people now, and he says, "Take heed, all ye people." That's a warning, a great warning. In other words, if you do what he says and you follow his words, okay, it's going to be on you. Okay, you prophesize this, it's false, therefore you're going to pay for it. So that was his answer to that. Okay, it's back to you, Marlene.
Okay.
Quickie, I got a long one coming up, so go ahead.
Okay. So he's effectively, when I say he, Ahab, has effectively gotten rid of Micaiah. And, I can't help thinking, I must have a very devious mind. I'd love to get rid of some of my problems the way Ahab does. Just send them off to jail and kick them out. But, I also keep getting reminded of the statement my mother used to make all the time when she'd look at me when I do something that she didn't care for, and she'd go, "Some people never learn." And that's a perfect description of Ahab. He never learned. Okay, so now we're going to get rid of it. In the next few verses, we're going to look at 1 Kings 29 through 40. And this is Ahab's death. Okay, that's talking about him dying. This is commentary, my opinion. I read it and look at, he got what he deserved. And I know that's not a very Christian thing to say, but Ahab deserved what he got on the battlefield, in my opinion. So verses 29 through 40. Jeannie, do you have, would you read those, please?
Sure,
Thank you.
I will. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, went up to Ramoth Gilead. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "I will enter the battle in disguise, but you will wear your royal robes." So the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. Now the king of Aram had ordered his 32 chariot commanders, "Do not fight with anyone, small or great, except the king of Israel." When the chariot commanders saw Jehoshaphat, they thought, "Surely this is the king of Israel." So they turned to attack him. But when Jehoshaphat cried out, the chariot commanders saw that he was not the king of Israel and stopped pursuing him. But someone drew his bow at random and hit the king of Israel between the sections of his armor. The king told his chariot driver, Wheel around and get me out of the fighting. I've been wounded." All day long the battle raged, and the king was propped up in his chariot facing the Arameans. The blood from his wound ran onto the floor of the chariot, and that evening he died. As the sun was setting, a cry spread through the army, "Every man to his town, every man to his land." So the king died and was brought to Samaria, and they buried him there. They washed the chariot at a pool in Samaria where the prostitutes bathed, and the dogs licked up his blood as the word of the Lord had declared. As for the other events of Ahab's reign, including all he did, the palace he built and adorned with ivory, and the cities he fortified, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Ahab rested with his ancestors, and Ahaziah, his son, succeeded him as king.
Okay, thank you. The map, 12 tribes of Israel. If you have that handy, this happened at Ramoth Gilead. Okay, Ramoth Gilead. So it is across the Jordan. If you get your maps and go to the right hand and go right side of the page, look at A, B, C, and across from C, you'll see Ramoth Gilead. So they were a fairly good distance for, not by Texas rules, but by Israel's rules, from Samaria, the capital city. They were actually all the way across, almost into Syrian country. Okay? So Ramoth Gilead, and they had to bring his body back, or they did bring it back to Samaria. Okay? So they did carry his body and brought him back. He got what he deserved. That's the worst or the best I could say for him. And I'm going to turn it now to Barbara, and she's going to read the Chronicles passage. And that's 2 Chronicles chapter 18, verses 28 through 34.
Can you all see me? Because my picture just went fluid.
Yes.
Oh, you can see me okay, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I hate you to miss the vision. Okay. So the death of Ahab of Israel, again, very close. It's got a few additions, but basically it's quite close. So the king of Israel, this is verse 29. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, went up to Ramoth Gilead, and the king of Israel, who is Ahab, said to Jehoshaphat, "I will disguise myself and go into battle, but you put on your robes." Okay, so the king of Israel disguised himself, and they went into battle. It is easy to understand why King Ahab of Israel went to this battle. He didn't want to believe that Micaiah's prophecy was true, and he wanted to courageously oppose it. It is less easy to understand why King Jehoshaphat of Judah went into this battle with Ahab. He should have believed the prophecy of Micaiah and known that the battle would end in the disaster and the death of at least Ahab. It may be that Jehoshaphat had a fatalistic attitude toward the will of God, figuring that if it was all God's will, then there was nothing he or anyone else could do about it. But I knowing you ladies and hearing a lot from you, I think we would have taken the road of, well, hey, you're going to disguise yourself? What does that do to me? I think we would have reacted to that. Why Jehoshaphat did not, we're not sure. So, but it could be that he just thought God will take care of me, which would be a very good reason. Okay, even if I go out there with a sign that says, "I am Jehoshaphat, king of Judah," he'd still, if he had enough faith, he believed that God would deliver him. So we're hoping
Hey,
that.
Barbara,
Yes.
he forgot to bring the second change of clothes.
Oh yeah. His wife didn't pack it for him, right? Okay. So he thought it's God's will and there's nothing we can do about it. If anyone has to say something, you need to speak, because I can't say, excuse me, or, I can't see you. Sorry about that. By the time I fix it, the list will be over. Okay, so going into battle, Ahab did not want to be identified as a king and therefore be a special target. He thought this would help protect him against Micaiah's prophecy of doom. It is more difficult to explain why Jehoshaphat agreed to go into the battle as the only clearly identified king. Perhaps he was either not very smart or he had a very great faith. So Ahab pretended to dishonor Jehoshaphat, but intended to save himself and to elude Micaiah's prophecy. I think it's interesting, all Ahab's reasoning, and it's all based on a total misunderstanding of Yahweh, okay? If God were a human being at that time, his thought would have been close, okay? Yeah, he doesn't know any better, therefore I'll hide. And that human being, God human being, won't know it's me, okay? However, we know that God knows everything. The fact that we could hide in the deepest spot in the earth's core and God would still find us. So he totally missed that quality or of God's, that he knows where we are no matter what we look like, okay? And he didn't get that at all. So his concept of God was strictly on the physical things in the earth that he would see done, fire, rain, all those things. Yes, God controlled those, but he never thought that God knew what really went on in the human mind or the humans figuring things out, okay? So that was totally above him, and that's what was his downfall, okay? Now, the king so Jehoshaphat is saved, and Ahab dies in battle. Now, they were fighting Syria, okay? Now, the king of Syria had commanded the captains of the chariots who were with him, saying, fight with no one, small or great, but only with the king of Israel. So he was smart. He knew who his opponent was. So it was when the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat that they said, oh, it's the king of Israel. Therefore, they surrounded him to attack. But Jehoshaphat cried out, and the Lord helped him. And God diverted them from him. For so it was, when the captains of the chariots saw that it was not the king of Israel, that they turned back from pursuing Jehoshaphat. Now, a certain man drew a bow at random, and he struck the king of Israel between the joints of his armor. So he said to the driver of his chariot, this is Ahab saying this, turn around and take me out of the battle, for I am wounded. The battle increased that day, and the king of Israel propped himself up in his chariot, facing the Syrians until evening, and about the time of sunset died. Now Jehoshaphat, when they were going after him, cried out to the Lord, and the Lord helped him. This showed faith, number one. Also, he was scared. Don't blame him, okay? But this shows that the Lord knew, that the Lord had the people of Syria realize this was not Ahab, okay? So Jehoshaphat was able to escape. So finding himself as the only identifiable king in the battle, Jehoshaphat found himself quickly in danger, and he cried out to the Lord. Now, when they then turned from pursuing him. Now, I love this part of the story. A certain man drew a bow at random and struck the king of Israel. Now, this was the way they used to fight. When they would go in battle, you see pictures in ancient times of the two sides coming together in battle. And they didn't aim for a particular person to kill, okay? Arrows flew. Indians, arrows flew. Okay, they hoped they hit a target. Sometimes they hit horses or whatever they were riding, and sometimes they hit people. So they did that very randomly, okay? And that's what this man did. He was in a battle, and so he shot his arrow, and over the fence, the invisible fence, it went. Okay, so the second chance, it was reading it, a certain man. It doesn't even give him a name. Okay, just this random man who's in the battle. Okay, and he pulled his bow at random, but it struck as if it were a sin-seeking missile hitting right between the joints of his armor. Now, if you ever watch America's Got Talent, you see some of the acts where the man shoots an arrow or a knife at his girlfriend or his wife who's standing in front of a board, and he misses her ear, he misses her neck. That's not random. He's aiming. Okay, this one, it was just aimed randomly, hoping it would hit somebody or something by this certain man whose name we do not know. Now, God, also the fact that it hit between the joints of the armor. Okay, if it had hit the breastplate, okay, it would not have killed Ahab. But it got that little, where it bended, where the armpit, whatever, it got that little bitty slot. Okay, I don't know about you, but if I was standing in front of them, I'd probably miss. It took a talented person to get there. So God orchestrated the unintended actions of a man to result in an exercise of his judgment. So we know that arrow was guided by God. It had to land. Ahab was to die. And it was done by the hand of a man. Okay, God did not come down physically and strike Ahab. Okay, it was done by a human being, by a man, but God did take the route, have the arrow take the route that it would go where it would kill Ahab. Now, probably this man already had shot many arrows, and he went on in his simplicity, little knowing that this particular arrow was to be guided through all the confusion, straight to its mark by the unerring knowledge and power of God. Yet, so it was. Now, we might, goodness, the whole thing turned off. Can you all hear me? Okay. We probably, at the time, and probably never knew. I bet a lot of them were shooting arrows. So we probably, other than God, we probably have no idea who actually aimed that arrow. Okay, it was just done in a battle. So again, this is God directing. Now, men may secrete themselves so that other men may never find them. And we hear that a lot. Now I can't think of the story now. It's a Shakespearean thing, but I can't think of it. Men may never find them. But when the hour of their judgment has come, God takes hold on some ordinary event and makes it the highway on which he comes to carry out his purpose. This is a commentary. I love it. I love it, though. The average man of the world would say, it just happened. It's a coincidence, strictly, all right? But God says it's a man of faith. And that's a big difference in how things happen. And now what joy could Ahab, black soul, ready to depart, have for his ivory house? Remember, in the King's version, it talked about Ahab had an ivory house. Can't imagine. It's a lot of elephants, but anyway, but the term is used in the Bible, and it's used in both Kings and it's used in Chronicles. Okay, so that his soul. I mean, what did all that matter? In other words, it's another way of saying worldly goods. When you're dead, you're dead. They mean nothing to you. Okay, so what could it have meant to Ahab's black soul? Who had not rather be Micaiah in the jail than Ahab in the chariot? Wicked men have the advantage of earthly success, okay? Because they will do anything to gain that success. Now, we're not talking about the righteous man. but the enemies of God, they think they can do anything. All right. Where the godly man, he's the one that has control of his end, and his end is his death. And he is the righteous man. He has the joy and the privilege of enjoying eternity with God. So there's a very, very significant difference between the end of the story with the wicked man and the end of the story with the righteous man. Now the king of Israel propped himself up in his chariot. He faced the Syrians until evening. Ahab faced the end of his life bravely. Now he died propped up in his chariot to inspire his troops. When his death became known, the battle was over. So it seems to me, when they found out he was dead, they stopped the battle. It seems to me that Ahab wasn't too popular around the world. And usually in war, even if the head dies, there's a lieutenant or whatever, and they keep going until they win the land or whatever. Okay, they're fighting for. But here, when everyone realized that Ahab was dead, they stopped fighting. Okay, so to me, that signifies that they may have been kind of glad he was dead. Okay, because if you served in his army, I'm sure you saw many horrendous things happen, unfairness far beyond a court martial or anything like that. So he probably was a very, very cruel dictator to even his own people. It appears that the Israelites and the Jews maintained the fight the whole of the day. But when at evening the king died, and this was known, there was a proclamation made, probably with the consent of both the Syrians and the Israelites, that the war was over. Okay, I wanted to just give a little comparison here. This obviously is the relationship is now over between Jehoshaphat and Ahab. Keep in mind that Jehoshaphat's son married Jezebel and Ahab's daughter, okay, to unite the two countries. And that's what Ahab played on, all right? So King Jehoshaphat of Judah and King Ahab of Israel shared a close physical and military alliance. Despite Jehoshaphat being generally remembered as a faithful king and Ahab as notoriously wicked, the two nations temporarily united to secure their borders and fight common enemies. Their relationship was defined by several key elements. First of all, the marriage alliance. They cemented their political treaty by arranging a marriage between Jehoshaphat's son, Jehoram, and Ahab's daughter, Athaliah. Second, they had a joint military campaign, several. Jehoshaphat visited Ahab in Samaria, where he was honored with a feast. Ahab then persuaded Jehoshaphat to join forces in an attempt to retake the city of Ramoth Gilead from the Arameans. And thirdly, a spiritual tension. Before engaging in battle at Ramoth Gilead, Jehoshaphat insisted on seeking counsel from a prophet of God, while Ahab gathered 400 false prophets who promised victory. Jehoshaphat requested a true prophet of the Lord, which led Ahab calling the prophet Micaiah. Okay, I think that, let's see. Yeah, okay, you got it, Marlene. I'm going to try to find a picture of you all.
Can I say something just real quick?
Yes,
Sure.
Just the fact that that arrow that pierced Ahab undoubtedly clipped or went into some vital organs, because your lungs, your heart, your spleen,
Yeah.
all that, your
sure.
gut. So he lasted all day through the battle till sunset. So his death was slow and it was agonizing.
Yes.
So Barbara, when you said a death he deserved, for all the evil he did, he probably did deserve that. Yeah.
He did. Oh,
It
you're
is.
so right. You're so definitely. Uh, yeah, it's Laura speaking, right? Okay. So, yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah. Uh, a story I remember from growing up and from my theology teacher in college, and we were talking about coming to God at the last minute. You live an evil life and you die and you suddenly are converted. And I can remember him telling this story. I grew up outside of New York City, and there were in a time when there were so many mafia criminals. I mean, it was just run by them. That it was long before the Albanians and the other mafias, Chinese, and all that. But what his son was just as evil. I can't think of the name of the crook now, but anyway, his son or his brother was shot, and he was dying, and the family was quote unquote Catholic, and so he called for a priest. He was still alive, and he wanted to confess, and he confessed his sins to the Catholic priest. The priest gave him the last rites, and our theology teacher said he went right to heaven, because if you confess God, I mean, it doesn't matter when, that's your ticket to getting into heaven. And we had quite a class discussion on it. And why should all of those people who worked hard, who suffered, who took care of the sick, who did good things in their life, might have a death of 2 years with pancreatic cancer or something like that? Okay, when this guy, 5 minutes before he dies, he's going to go right to heaven. And how unfair that is. And we never did resolve the problem except to say it's God's will. But it's just interesting about salvation. But Ahab obviously never turned to the Lord, even as he was dying. And I think, in a way, Laura, I hadn't thought about it, but if he gave him he didn't die instantly and took a lot of time, that may have been God's way of giving him an opportunity. If he looked around and said, Micaiah was right. His God said, I was going to die in battle, and I'm going to die in this battle. And that would have been a perfect opportunity for Ahab to say, I believe in your God. Like you said earlier, his prophecies are coming true. Okay, so I do believe in it, but Ahab did not. He did not repent. He did not acknowledge Yahweh. So he probably went to where he deserved. But there's a lot of backstories that kind of go with all of this history. But God does offer us opportunity, and he never closed his. One of you, Marlene, it may have been you earlier, who said that God does not close the door. He's always trying to get people to get back to him. There's so much opportunity out there. And sometimes by having a slower death, as agonizing as it is, it's giving those people an opportunity to turn and accept Jesus. And if they don't, then bye-bye, see you in hell. That's kind of the way it goes. But yeah, there's so much to this. It's really interesting. So okay, back to you.
Thank you, Barbara. There are those I have talked with and have people who think that God guided that arrow into the perfect spot. I'm not sure I believe that. God lets, in my opinion, things happen. He'll stand back and let us go. He may create the situation wherein something happens, but God's purpose was done that day. And like Laura said, he did suffer. In many people's opinion, his suffering was not enough to atone for what he did. But that was for God to decide, not us. Now, next week, we've got about 10 minutes left. I didn't ask you to have these, but back a while ago, I gave you these charts on the divided kingdom of the North and the South. And that lists the kings of the North and the South. And also the sheets on the prophets of Israel and the prophets of Judah. We're coming to the end of Jehoshaphat's life. And back when we talked about these charts, and mine is small, I cut it because I keep it in my Bible, who the kings are. Remember, I told you that in the kingdom of the north, which was Israel, there were no good kings. None. Okay? In the kingdom of the south, there were what was considered to be only 3 good kings. Okay? Who remembers what was the criteria used to determine whether a king was a good king or a bad king? Do you remember?
A good king followed God.
Exactly. The good king followed God or obeyed the Lord or believed in the Lord. Okay. Jehoshaphat, the king we've just been talking about, and next week we'll talk a little bit more about him and his rule. He was considered a good king, one of the good kings of Israel, or of Judah, excuse me. So you might want to, on your chart, write good beside him. Now notice, he did many things that weren't good, that we kind of go, But he followed God. He continued to believe in God and did what he thought was God's work. So as a result, he's considered a good king.
David did the same.
Yes.
He sinned a lot.
Look at Solomon.
Yeah.
Look at Solomon. You know, that's why it's important to remember the criteria for considering whether he's a good or bad king. Does he follow God, or did he follow God? 100% of the time, unfortunately, none of us are capable of doing that 100% of the time. But again, to quote an old saying, his heart was in the right place. He did attempt to follow God. The fact that, and Barbara brought this out, so write this on your chart so that you have it, that Jehoshaphat was a good king. Needless to say, of course, Ahab, being a king of the north, was not a good king. We're going to spend some time later on. Barbara mentioned this earlier. God works in many strange ways or mysterious ways. The fact that Ahab, and who was his wife?
Jezebel.
Jezebel's daughter married a king of the south is just almost mind-blowing. You know, a daughter of the very worst God let into his kingdom that was left. And there'll be several passages, or at least a couple of days spent on that when we get to it, because she plays a very active part in the life of Judah at the time. Okay. That's all I had to say. Remember, Syria is the same as Aram. Syria is the modern day name for the country that was known as Aram. And Damascus I laugh. We just celebrated our 250th anniversary. We had a big hoopla. I mean, we did a lot. And you look at something like Damascus and Rome, who are thousands of years old. And God takes care of things. He lets things happen. And while we are justifiably proud of what we've accomplished in the 250 years, it's nothing compared to what some of these countries and cities have accomplished during their centuries of time. Okay, are there any other questions or any comments? We are coming to the end of Ahab. Laura?
When I was growing up, I would occasionally hear someone exclaim, "Jumpin' Jehoshaphat." And I just wondering where that came from. So maybe you could enlighten us next week.
I've got a song, and I've got it.
Good.
And
It'll talk,
next week.
that's a to be continued. Turn in next week.
Yes. got that going.
Okay. All right.
Should we do our prayer?
Yes. Yeah. Are there any other comments? Okay. Barbara will give us the closing prayer.
I just wanted to tell you, and I'm sure you all feel the same way, this last week has been a glorious week for our country. If you look at, you tune into the fireworks or the goings on, Channel 13 always does that, the musical and everything else. The thing that impressed me more than anything, we got through a whole week with thousands and thousands of people together in one place. There wasn't one terrorist show up. There wasn't any kind of racism. There wasn't black against white or Mexican against Indian. It was such a joy to look at that TV and see thousands of people, whether it be in our American celebrations or if it would be at the FIFA games. Okay, and you know those two teams opposed one another, but at the end they hugged. I mean, it was just, and I thought, oh God, why can't we do something like that? And this was a place with not, yes, Marlene?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you finished? I was just going to say,
No.
if you read or listen to comments of people from other countries who are here for the FIFA games, I read over and over where they say, we hear about all the terrible things you do. We were almost afraid to come. And you're a wonderful country. You're very giving. You're very open.
It was beautiful.
Yes.
And what interested me too, there were no politicians featured. This was the people. This was the people. This is you and me going to the thing, which brings to mind peace. And if we want to live like that, we need peace. And peace, where does peace start? Within the heart. And here is a song that was written in 1955. Some of you may know it. It used to be used quite popularly at Christmas time, but I don't hear it that much at Christmas anymore. But the words are, and if every one of us could put this into our lives, we'd have last week for a long time. So please take
Barbara.
Yes.
Barbara, we have 1 minute left.
Okay,
In fact,
I'm going to read it.
Time.
I'm reading the prayer. Okay. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let it begin with peace, the peace that was meant to be. With God as our Father, brothers all are we. Let us work with my brother in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let me be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow, to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
Amen.
God bless you.
Thank you, Barbara and Marlene.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Barbara.